Welcome to Couch Quarterbacks.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back. It's been a fun spring/summer for us here at the Couch Quarterbacks. But, Andrew, we have live football coming up in less than a week. College football, of course, but real football, the NFL, will be here in a few more weeks. And we wanted to bring you guys in, get you guys updated, and give our predictions before the season starts of what we think is going to happen. Welcome to the Couch Quarterbacks. Again, guys, it's so great to be back.
Yeah, for Ben Steinberg, I'm Andrew Rochford, and like you said, Stein, after this long hiatus from our last episode that we filmed, we are now back into the grind of football, and over the next couple weeks, we're going to be breaking down all the divisions in the NFL, and then we're going to start having the 2 shows a week and start getting really back into the groove of things with getting back into filming and stuff. So it's been a little while. We might be a little rusty going into this, so just bear with us on that. But in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the AFC East and the AFC North, breaking down both those divisions, talking about all 8 teams from the 2 divisions, and just everything that you need to know going into this upcoming season, kind of a general background of all these teams. But then Stein will also get into a little bit of fantasy outlook for some of these players.
Yeah, we got some fantasy towards the end for those who are interested in fantasy. I know a lot of people do want to hear about the X's and O's about the team and
getting excited for fantasy
the
football.
defensive part. Oh, I know it's not that far away. It's kind of, these next few weeks are going to go by, like molasses, but we'll get there. And it's just a great time for football. We're finally going to have people in full stadiums this coming time. So, hopefully that stays for a while. We know that COVID has, we fully probably thought back in March or wherever or April when we did the drafting show that we were going to, be done with all this, but it's still a thing.
It's still a thing, but at least it will not be the empty stadiums that we had last year.
No cardboard. I mean, maybe some of the West Coast teams taking COVID a little more seriously. We'll still have those cardboard cutouts, but Allegiant Stadium will finally have people. We'll finally see people in SoFi Stadium, those 2 gorgeous stadiums that have been built that really didn't get to show off their, how it can be for fans. So we're excited to see those stadiums in action. But those are stadiums in the AFC West and the AFC South that we'll get to another time. So
yeah, Stein, let's hop into the AFC East. That's the first division that we're going to cover today, and we'll start off with the best team in the AFC East, the team that made it to the AFC Championship game last year, and that is the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and call them Ben's Big Dogs. This is one of my AFC Big Dogs.
We need like an official stamp for that.
These guys, one of, maybe 3 or 4 teams in the AFC that I consider contenders, like just overall. I really don't see a lot of weaknesses in this team generally.
I mean, it's really tough to see. You have Josh Allen at quarterback, who was second in the MVP voting last season. You had Stephon Diggs, who was the leading receiver in terms of reception yards in the league last year. They have a top defense in the league. So, like you said, there's really not many weaknesses on this team. Really, the only thing would be the run game, and Josh Allen does half of that on his own.
Yeah, I mean, people forget that Allen is a runner. Most people think he'll beat you with his arm, and he does have a howitzer for an arm, but his legs have really helped get him out of some sticky situations, and brought him into a really lucrative contract. He signed for
6
in
years,
August. Yeah,
6 years, $258 million extension, $150 million guaranteed. Signed that back on August 6th. Well deserved for the guy. Like I said, second in the MVP voting last year.
Guy is also just a really nice guy. Does a lot for the city of Buffalo. Also not super like of a vocal guy. Not a guy who's gonna go out there and say I'm the best. He'll show you that he's one of the best with his play. He won't do it with his mouth.
Let your play do the talking. He had 70% completion percentage, 5,000 total yards through the air and on the ground, 45 touchdowns compared to just 18 turnovers last season.
Yeah, and I'm sure in terms of his turnovers, some of those are fumbles, not as much interceptions, because he's like we said, he's sneaky mobile. So we're expecting for him to kind of pick up where he left off last year, stay in the conversation for the MVP. He's not going to get. I personally don't think he's going to get the top billing for MVP. Maybe not even the top 2 or 3 this year, just because we got Rodgers and some other guys that media is going to want to cover more. Because let's be honest, the media doesn't care that much about Buffalo. And it sucks because it's such a good team that needs the exposure.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be in the MVP conversation again this season. If he's able to replicate his performance from last year, he'll be right up there once again in the top 2 or 3.
I just don't think he's gonna have the top billing. He's not gonna be the guy. It's his to win. But it's probably like a guy like Rodgers is to lose.
You also have to think you have guys
Mahomes,
like Lamar, who's won in the past. You got Mahomes. Both those guys missed a couple of games last season, so they're definitely going to have their hand in the ring right there as well. So it's obvious the MVP is a quarterback battle. So
it really is. We love the running backs, but those guys just don't stay on the field enough. And receivers. I mean, we did see a receiver win a Heisman with last year, but receiver winning MVP would be really hard. And defensive MVP, they got defensive player of the year. They got their own award.
Exactly. So we talked about Josh Allen. We talked about his legs. Let's talk about the actual running backs for this team because
that's probably their biggest faux pas. And I'll talk about their defense for a second too when we get to the defense. But their running back core, I mean, it's not gonna win you any awards.
So you got Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, both coming back, both younger guys, only in their second and third years in the league. Singletary was their leading back last season, had 687 yards, just 2 touchdowns on the ground though. Zach Moss, as a rookie, just played in 13 games, 481 yards, 4 touchdowns, a little bit of a bigger back compared to Singletary. He got hurt in the playoffs last season, had ankle surgery in the offseason. And then he's had a hamstring injury during training camp. So they brought in Matt Breida, who was supposed to do some big things with Miami last season. Ended up not being the case. Just kind of blew up on them. So he's with the Bills, and he's kind of hopped into that top 2 running back conversation with the Zach Moss injury.
No, I mean, Moss having 4 touchdowns last year, especially for being a younger guy, a rookie even. I mean, that's something you can easily build on. 4 touchdowns can turn into 6, maybe even 7 or 8 this season. So I mean, like I said, like we said, Allen can really pick up the slack in the run game.
Yeah, Allen 8 touchdowns on the ground, 421 yards. So he was in 3rd place in their team in rushing last season by a slim margin.
The thing that worries you though is it is Buffalo, and we when we get into December and November, December, January even, some of those games it's gonna be freezing. It's going to be balls freezing, Rich. And they're going to have to rely on the run game, I mean, they don't have LaShawn McCoy like they did in the past or like a Frank Gore type to, get 30, 40 carries to really in those windy, freezing games.
Well, and the thing that you worry about as well is Josh Allen in his 3 seasons. He's had 89 or more rushes in the first 3 seasons and 100+ in the past 2. So you hear about all these guys like Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, where teams talking about how they want to run their quarterback less just to prevent injury. Yeah. I mean, you can't predict an injury, but with all those carries on the ground for Allen, he's taken some big hits. He's a bigger quarterback, but he's still taking some shots.
He does have the MVP behind him, Mitch Trubisky, as a backup.
Yeah, you're right.
If he does go down. So, I mean, certainly a capable backup, but obviously a huge downgrade from what Allen has been able to accomplish. Their success is just going to depend on his health and his ability to command that offense, as pretty much almost every team that we're talking about is. Let's talk about who he's going to be throwing to, though, right now. Stephon Diggs, easily their number 1 guy.
Yeah, I mentioned it. He was leading the league in receptions and reception yards, 127 receptions, over 1,500 yards, 8 touchdowns last season. He has been dealing with a little bit of a knee injury in training camp. It doesn't seem to be too severe. Their coach, McDermott's not really concerned about it. He should be back at practice next week. But
yeah, I mean, he's not going to be playing tonight.
I was going to say, with a veteran
tomorrow,
player like that, he probably wasn't going to play much in the preseason anyway. Just rest him up, and so he can get those reps and get ready for the long haul of we haven't mentioned, of a 17-game season now.
Yeah, we will talk about that as the season goes on. And also, there's only 3 preseason games now. I mean, that kind of makes sense because like by the third preseason game, it's like who's really like watching?
Yeah, that's what
even by the second.
That's what they used to have even more preseason games and less regular season games. But then when they cut down and added more regular season games, they cut down on the preseason games. So the number 20 has pretty much been the number of games that they played in a season for.
I would say honestly just 3.5 too. Because they do these mixed practices where they scrimmage. I mean, like the Falcons
joint practices before the preseason games.
Scrimmaging the Dolphins right now, and pretty much every team scrimmaging another team at this point. The team that they're going to be playing in their upcoming preseason game. Yeah,
so the number 2 receiver is probably going to be Cole Beasley out of the slot. He had almost a 1,000-yard season last year, 967 yards. He is a guy that's been very outspoken about not getting the vaccine, or at least wanting more information about the vaccine. So it looks like he's still going to play this season. We're going to assume that he is going to play this season, but he'll be the number 2 option out of the slot position.
We'll keep monitoring the COVID situation there with Cole Beasley, but definitely the kind of the poster child of the I don't know if I want to classify him as anti-vaxxer, like one of those crazy people. But he's someone who's just, I don't know, he needs to put football in front of, football is his career, and, we're not going to get into the politics of the situation.
Well, I feel like it is significant to know that their left tackle, Deion Dawkins, was actually hospitalized recently due to COVID, so that may be something that could sway Beasley's decision to maybe end up getting the vaccine if he wants to play.
Shout out to the Falcons, first NFL team to be 100% vaccinated. Maybe that's why they cut a few guys recently. They
had to make sure that they had the 100% vaccine percentage. But yes, it is very good because it's one thing that the team doesn't have to worry about going forward is like whether or not guys are vaccinated
focus on football. I mean, NFL has said this year, if teams aren't able to field an enough team like what the Ravens had last year, we're gonna have forfeits. And you know what a forfeit is in the NFL? It's a 2-0 win. It's the weirdest, and it doesn't count towards the draft. It's very confusing. There's a whole lot of
it makes sense that it'd be confusing since it rarely ever happens. So but that is funny. But a 2-0 win.
We do have Beasley in the slot, and then they do add Emmanuel Sanders, who's a nice nice possession receiver.
Yeah, you lose John Brown in free agency, so you got the 34-year-old Emmanuel Sanders coming off a 700+ yard season with the Saints with Drew Brees' noodle arm at quarterback. So ended up being a productive season for him, and I think that's a very serviceable top 3 wide receivers when you talk about Diggs, Beasley, Sanders. You got a younger guy, Gabe Davis, and then Isaiah McKenzie out of University of Georgia just to round out your top 5 receivers. So very solid group. You got your surefire number 1, one of the top guys in the league in Diggs, and then just some nice guys to back them up. Quickly, the offensive line before we get into the defense. They're ranked as the 14th best offensive line by Pro Football Focus. Dawkins, as I mentioned earlier, and Darrell Williams are considered one of the top tackle tandems in the league, so they're sitting right around average in terms of their offensive line, which of course is very important when you got your franchise quarterback that you got to protect.
Yeah, I mean they're an offensive line that's not gonna win you a lot of games, but not gonna lose you a lot of games either.
Yeah, very steady.
Like we said, this team's gonna go through pretty much Josh Allen's arm and his legs to take them where they need to go. Let's talk about their defensive side of the ball, which for the past previous years, the Bills have been all defense, no offense. Mm-hmm. This year, it seems a little more balanced. Defense, I would say, is above average.
Definitely.
They run a 4-3 style defense, so 4 guys up front. And I would say their biggest weakness, which in the past has been their strength, is their defensive line. Mm-hmm. They really don't have anyone really to write home about on the front 4. I mean, Mario Addison and Jerry Hughes, and these guys both had 3-4 sacks last year. Ed Oliver, we're still waiting for him to, break out. He's, remember that big guy from Houston?
Yeah, he was talked about as number 1 pick and then kind of dropped to, 8th overall or something like that to Buffalo.
Yeah, Gregory Rousseau, they do add through the draft from Miami. Hopefully we'll have immediate impact on that D-line. That's really just kind of their weakness.
Yeah, but they were 15th in sacks last season, so, middle of the pack. Just like you said, when you're talking about some of these guys, just put, Ed next to them.
It's not an elite defense. I would say their better part is Jordan Poyer at strong safety. 124 tackles last year, 2 picks, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. Kind of a do-it-all guy. Trayman Edmonds from Virginia Tech, really good young linebacker, second leading tackler. Tre'Davious White, also I would classify as an elite corner to round out that secondary.
Yeah, definitely a great secondary. You talk about Edmonds as a middle linebacker as well. Then, like I said, just overall, when you put it all together, this is an above-average defense. Like you can't just be one-sided and make it to the AFC Championship game. So this is going to be an all-around good team.
Yeah, I would say their only part that they would have to get better in is their defensive line, which they seemed Russo will hopefully.
They made some additions to move in the right direction. So. Expect the same from the Buffalo Bills going into this season. Quick fantasy outlook before we hop on over to the next team, the Miami Dolphins. Josh Allen, we mentioned, he'll be the top 2 or 3 quarterback off the boards. He was the number 1 fantasy scorer last season, but it is significant to note that the number 1 fantasy scorer hasn't repeated as a number 1 since like 2012. So he's being drafted right after Mahomes. I've even seen Kyler go ahead of him. But either way, if you got Josh Allen on your team, you're going to be set up.
Maybe Russ too.
Set up pretty.
Maybe Russ too.
Yeah, Russ is hovering around like the top 5 or 6. So there's a couple of guys that are all in that conversation.
Yeah, he's definitely. If you have him, you'll be set on quarterback. Really don't need anything.
Well, and that's one of the big things for him too. Is like we said, with using his legs, 8 rushing touchdowns last season. So that's definitely going to help boost his fantasy numbers.
Yeah, he'll be taken in second or third, easy.
Yeah, so in terms of the running backs between Singletary, Moss, Breida, I kind of grouped them all together. Great 0 running back draft targets. If you're going wide receiver, tight end, quarterback very early, these are guys that you could look at towards the back end of your draft. Right now, Moss is going at a 107 ADP, Singletary 115. Both are going in the 9th round of a 12-team league. So
yeah, these are guys that you would maybe stash.
I was going to say, there's 0 running back targets where if you need a starting running back for a team, then they're good. But also if you want to just kind of get some depth at the running back position, then they're good guys off the bench.
I mean, we could see, like I said, if you have that inside information, it's going to be a freezing day in Buffalo. Maybe Moss would be a great, flex or something.
Definitely. So Stephon Diggs, overall he's going like 3rd or 4th off the board for the wide receivers. He was the wide receiver 3 in PPR last season. So just once again, he's going to be another top option going in the back end of the 1st round. Start of the 2nd round, I like him as the 4th wide receiver. I've got Calvin Ridley, I think slightly.
Yeah, I am a little bit concerned about Stephon. I mean, maybe I saw more as a wide receiver 1 when he was a Viking. I mean, I still think he's capable of being a star and being a great pickup, but I don't know if he'd be my first wide receiver off the board, or maybe second even wide receiver off the board.
Yeah, I think the consensus is Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill are going to be the top guys, and then you kind of have like a 3-guy race between Diggs, Nuke Hopkins, and Calvin Ridley. All those guys are kind of interchangeable for 3, 4, and 5 for the wide receiver, but he's still going to be, once again, like Josh Allen, an elite option for your team. Between Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders, I think they're both decent bench pieces. Beasley's going in like the 13th round. Sanders is currently with his ADP going undrafted. I think he is a guy that once injuries start to occur going into the season, if he stays healthy, that he could end up being a guy on the waiver wire you could pick up a couple weeks into the season and could have a nice week or two. But I think both of them are going to be a little unpredictable. Beasley a little more reliable than him.
Yeah, I mean, Beasley, the biggest knock on him is if Beasley was completely healthy, I'd say he'd be a perfect, bench guy, perfect guy to just stream if you need a nice flex. But with his COVID stuff, it's like you don't know if he's going to play. I mean, he's like the quintessential slot receiver.
Exactly. Dawson Knox, their starting tight end, going undrafted. You don't need him. Unless something changes where Josh Allen starts throwing to the tight end more, then I don't think you'll need him at all this season. And then we mentioned the Bills' defense. They were 8th overall in fantasy last season, so definitely if you're playing...
Yeah, 12-man take. They're a top defense to take. We'll talk about some bottom-tier defenses, but these guys are top.
We'll get to a couple bottom-tier defenses later on with these two divisions. So let's move on to the Miami Dolphins. 10-6 last season, just missed out on the playoffs, and their biggest question going into this season is going to be, how will the offense run in year 2 under Tua? No more Ryan Fitzpatrick.
The safety blanket is gone. Mm-hmm. Ryan Fitzpatrick is the safety blanket. He's gone. This is Tua's team now, and it's been pretty much 80% Tua slander, 20% Tua praise. That's what I've seen.
Yeah, Tua's hip, of course, was still kind of an issue last season. It seems to be fully healthy after another offseason and getting into training camp. Tua last year in 2020, 6-3 record as a starter, 64% completion percentage, only 1,800 yards passing, 11 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. You're going to need to see a big uptick in a lot of those stats going into this year. Hopefully he has a full, healthy season. Like I said, the hip has been an issue in the past, going back to his Alabama days. But I really don't know what to expect from Tua going into this season.
Like I said, it's definitely been trending towards slander for him. A lot of people have been, saying he's going to be a bust. This is not the long-term solution.
Yeah, of course, he was mentioned in some Deshaun Watson trade talks early on in the offseason before everything was going on with him.
I hope he's successful. I want to see a successful Tua, but it's gonna be this is his like pretty much his audition to be an NFL quarterback. He's got a full season. He's the guy. If he stays healthy, he'll be good. Jacoby Brissett, capable backup, always a guy who's been around there, so he at least has him to rely on.
He was Phillip Rivers' designated Hail Mary thrower from last season with the Colts, but they signed him as a backup. Running back is a little bit of a question for them. You saw Myles Gaskin kind of burst onto the scene last season out of nowhere. He was supposed to be the third, maybe even fourth string running back for them. They had we mentioned Matt Breida, but also had Jordan Howard, who was
an interesting like kind of carousel of running backs.
He made for some very interesting stat lines of 8 carries for 6 yards and a touchdown.
Exactly. So, to help complement that, they signed backup running back from the Rams, who I'm sure they wish they still had right now, is Malcolm Brown.
Yeah, they signed Malcolm Brown. Salvin Ahmed was good in his 3 or 4 he was good in 3 out of his 4 starts last season when Gaskin was down due to injury. But once again, I think the biggest thing for the Dolphins is if they had a great running back to pair with Tua, then not all the pressure and all these headlines would be on Tua. But because they really don't have that star-studded running back, I think that's why more of the pressure goes on to Tua. When you look into their receiving game, there's almost too many mouths to feed with these guys because you got Devontae Parker, Mike Gesicki, you've got Will Fuller, who they signed to a 1-year deal. They draft Jalen Waddle. Yeah. They've got Preston Williams, who's been decent in his limited playing time.
And Albert Wilson
healthy.
Coming back from a sit-out last year.
Yeah, so there's 6 or 7 guys that are all trying to vie for 3 or 4 guys.
They have Alan Hearns and deep buried in their depth chart. Just want to throw him out there.
Yeah,
Great Jaguar.
He actually just hurt his wrist recently. He's gonna be out for a couple months, I think, getting wrist surgery. But yeah, just another.
Jakeem Grant is not bad either.
Yeah, so they've got a lot of depth in their wide receiver position, especially. So Tua's definitely got his options there for one of these guys to kind of emerge as a one. I'm not really sure who it's going to be. Jalen Waddle's been talked up a lot. Yeah. Obviously going early on in the draft to the Dolphins.
I mean, first game because Will Fuller will be suspended. First, you got Devontae Parker, Waddle, and you'll probably throw in, Preston Williams. Wilson's pretty much a deep threat guy. He's just a speedster. But like you said, too many cooks in the kitchen there. So they're going to have to probably make some moves, maybe to clear it up, to maybe, see what happens.
Well, remember Devontae Parker had that great season a couple years ago, almost 800 yards receiving last season, but he didn't really have a great chemistry with Tua. The games that he started, he didn't have that good of stat lines. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 outliers where he had some good games, but a lot of those stats came when Ryan Fitzpatrick was at quarterback. So not only that, but then having the other guys in the room. Yeah. Mike Gesicki had a nice season, 700 yards, 6 touchdowns, 53 receptions. Those were all career highs for him. So he's looking to keep up those numbers in this third year for him.
He'll become one of the I would say second tier or top tier tight ends. That's what he's looking to become. Now, in terms of their offensive line, pretty young. They do add Liam Eichenberg.
Yeah, out of Notre Dame. They're the 29th ranked offensive line going into this season, according to Pro Football Focus. So a bottom 5 offensive line going into this season. Like I said, I think they had 2 or 3 guys that were rookies last season starting for them. So hopefully they can continue to progress in year 2, because that'll also be a big thing for Tua, is if he can get some protection from the offensive line, everyone knows that's how the offense just keeps on cooking, not only passing but also running the football.
Yeah, in terms of their defense, it's pretty similar to almost the Bills. I mean, a lot of these defenses in the AFC East are really pretty good.
Yeah, 3 out of 4.
Yeah, 3 out of 4. I mean, we can make an argument for another team, but Xavier Howard, kind of their best player on their, not kind of, is their best player on their defense.
Definitely.
But definitely some sour grapes with him.
Yeah, so early on in training camp, there was I think it was an Instagram post saying that he wanted out of Miami, saying he wasn't making enough money. A couple weeks later, they end up restructuring his contract, got a guaranteed salary for the next 2 seasons, extra $5 million in incentives, and they'll look to sign him to an extension after this season. It looks like Howard would want to get a deal done in Miami, but yeah, the little cryptic Instagram post.
Yeah, he wants to get top player money, which
he just
last year,
he signed to a deal. I think it was like 5 years, $75 million 2 years ago, 2018, 2019, somewhere around there. And then they signed Byron Jones, I believe, the year after to more money. So that probably left kind of a sour taste in his mouth. Just signing another guy for a higher deal, but he's been able to walk the walk with 10 interceptions, which led the league last season. So.
Yeah, above average tackle numbers. And on the defense, that's pretty good. Like I said, it's very comparable to the Bills. Emmanuel Ogbah leading that defensive line, had a decent number of sacks last year. Jerome Baker, leading tackler, going to be a guy who's going to be kind of captaining that defense. So just like we said, an above average defense, but let's get into the fantasy aspect.
Yeah, so when you're talking about Tua, I'd say he's a quarterback too. So if you're going like super flex league, he'd be a nice second quarterback for you. Going undrafted in most standard leagues, he's going to be a guy that you maybe by week 3 or 4, if he's doing good, you're like, all right, I need something, get a streamer during the middle of the season with bye weeks. But once again, I could definitely see him being productive just because he's got some great receivers, some great guys around him. So yeah, Myles Gaskin, once again, another 0 running back target. He's going in the 4th round right now with his current ADP. Not someone that I'm specifically targeting in drafts. Unless you go, like I said, with those wide receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks early, then he's someone that could be maybe your running back 2 for the
running
league.
back 2 flex. That would be a great position for them. And then they got a plethora of receivers that we talked about.
Yeah, so we'll start with the tight end first. Mike Gesicki was tight end 7 last season. He's going around the 7th round. I expect a little bit of regression out of him just because of the addition of Fuller and Waddle. So I expect his numbers to go down. But then once again, tight end, it's hard after you get through like the top 5, 6 guys, then it's a pretty big drop off.
They've had some injury concerns with all their receivers, so he could be sticking around the same numbers. I hope he makes that kind of jump. Like I really hope he can get into that tight end 5-4 range. We'll see. We do look at Jalen Waddle. A big addition, a big unknown though. We haven't seen anything from him.
He's going in round 6 right now. A lot of people are drafting him as like a flex guy, first guy off the bench, which I'm fine with getting him around there just because you really don't know what to expect.
Please don't take him, as a 1 or 2 or even your flex right now.
Will Fuller going in the 8th round, then Devontae Parker going in the 11th round. I've drafted Will Fuller the past couple of years. Obviously, a big thing for him is just staying healthy. He's had a long injury history, and then with playing with a new team with Tua at quarterback, it's kind of someone to avoid.
He's a boomer bust guy.
Exactly. And then we mentioned about Devontae Parker kind of slipping to maybe like a 3rd receiving option on this team. So being drafted all the way down in the 11th round after being the wide receiver 11 all the way back in 2019. Like I said, when he had that big season.
So long ago.
And then, draft the defense. They were the 4th best in 2020. Stein mentioned with some of the pieces that they've got, they're going to be another viable starting defense in fantasy this season.
You're going to get sacks. You're going to get picks from these guys, even some forced fumbles. Moving on to a team that really has a good defense. Like I said, following the trend, the 7-9 Patriots of last year, pretty much a very non-Patriots year for this team.
At least for the offseason, when you're talking about all the additions that they made. So they re-signed Cam Newton, which we talked about on this show before, how we thought it was a little bit questionable. And then go down this long list of guys that they signed between Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, Matthew Judon, Raekwon McMillan, re-signed Ted Karras, Jalen Mills, Devon Godchaw. I mean, the list can go on and on and on with the free agent additions that they made. That big first 24 to 48 hours of free agency when they made all those signings. So this is going to be kind of a new look Patriots team, which I'm kind of excited for this season.
It's an interesting combination of old and new, because you got all these old guys who opted out last year or just didn't play that well last year, and then signing with these new guys with the mix of just sprinkle in of youth in there. So it's a very interesting Patriots team. It's not, the typical Patriots teams that we've seen in years past, obviously without Brady and his gang.
So that first year post Brady did not go well for the offense with Cam Newton under center. So the third worst passing offense, sixth worst scoring offense last season, which is a big reason why they were happy that Mac Jones fell into their lap in the middle of the first round. Probably going to be the backup. They've said that Cam Newton's going to be the starter to start out this season. Bill Belichick said Cam Newton's our starting quarterback. I think I've said that. That was a quote from him last week. Like I said, Newton just wasn't impressive last season. 7-8 record, under 3,000 yards passing, 8 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. Really, the only positive was that he had 12 rushing touchdowns, 600 yards rushing, which Cam has always been great with his feet. So
yeah, I mean, his problem is his arm, though. It's just not the same as it was. He's taken a beating over these years, and we've really seen him regress. And I've always liked him, but I just hate to see a guy regress like that. Luckily,
he's had those shoulder problems the past couple seasons. We saw it at the end of his career with the Panthers. But just we questioned why they would sign him after he did just so mediocre and so bad for this team last season. But it looks like they're going to try and give him a second chance. Did have a good week 2 of the preseason last night against the Eagles, so I guess kind of take that with a grain of salt, as the Eagles' defense is not anything to get excited about. He was 8 for 9, 103 yards, also had a passing touchdown, so decent numbers from him, as long as he doesn't either get injured or completely fall off a cliff in this last preseason game. He's going to be the starter week 1, but
he'll hold the reins until Mac is pretty much ready. And Mac has looked pretty good in first 2 preseason games.
13 and 19 passing both those games, 87 yards in the first one, 146 yards in the second one. Doesn't have any touchdown passes yet, but he's looked good for this team, and like I said, I think when you get to about a third of the way, halfway through the season, he's going to be the starter going the rest of the way. Yeah,
he'll definitely be the guy, and it's good for them to see them try to win without Brady, see if they can do it. Now, running back, it's pretty much a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
It's the Patriots, so even though they lose Rex Burkhead, you're gonna have a bunch of options at running back.
Rex Burkhead's not much.
It looks like Damian Harris is gonna be the quote unquote 1A, the starting running back. 10 games last season, he had almost 700 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. Non-existent in the passing game just because they have James White. They re-signed him in the offseason, a guy with 49 receptions. Yeah. And then Sony Michel, an injury-plagued season last year, only played in 9 games, had almost 500 yards rushing. So
only a single touchdown.
Yeah, Damian Harris, Sony Michel are going to be kind of the first and second down backs, and then James White will be the third down back. Also, Ramondre Stevenson, the rookie out of Oklahoma, drafted him in the 4th round, has been really good this preseason, had 4 touchdowns in the 2 games. Yeah, definitely
shooting up fantasy boards. Looked really good in all of his preseason games. We'll see how he translates in the regular season.
Yeah, probably nothing right now, but if a guy like Sony Michel or Damian Harris gets hurt, definitely an option off the waiver wire when you're talking fantasy-wise.
Yeah.
A new pass-catching core as well. They lose Demire Byrd, who actually was like their second leading receiver last season.
Yeah.
They added Nelson Aguilar, who had that breakout season for the Raiders with Derek Carr. He's probably going to be their wide receiver 1. Like I said, 48 receptions, 900 yards, 8 touchdowns with the Raiders. Jacoby Myers returns, a younger guy. He's been the most consistent receiver they've had during camp, had over 700 yards receiving, so he'll probably be a nice option as a wide receiver 2 out of that slot position. Then really the only other wide receiver to kind of talk about, N'Keal Harry, who has requested a trade a couple weeks ago. He's been battling injuries in his first couple seasons with the Patriots. He was actually in a sling last night during the preseason game. Towards the end, he had a shoulder injury.
Yeah, we've been getting mixed signals from him. They've been saying that he's taking strides, but then it's like he wants to be traded, and now he's hurt. So, I would say probably. I know we're not talking about fantasy right now, but just stay away from him.
Yeah, and once again, just all these pass catchers, even with the addition of Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, with Cam Newton at quarterback, it's hard to envision any of them having like super big seasons. You're gonna have to wait for Mac Jones to come around to really see some of these wide receivers maybe flourish. But with the Patriots offense, if they're gonna be ahead, they're gonna start grounding and pounding with Damian Harris and Sony Michel.
Yeah. Two new tight ends they do add, though, is Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith.
Both banged up right now, so of course.
Yeah, as it tends to happen in football. Henry, has been a pretty good, young tight end. Jonnu Smith, pretty good as well. Had 8 touchdowns last year, almost 500 yards. Just looking really good. Henry, kind of an off year, I would say, last year. Only 4 touchdowns, but still over 600 receiving yards.
Yeah, expect him to be a bigger piece in the red zone when he's out there and healthy. The Patriots needed a big upgrade at tight end. They had less than 250 yards receiving from their tight ends last season. Old Florida State Seminole Ryan Izzo was leading the way for them with like 200 receiving yards. He's on.
And they get guys who
Houston last season
who combined for over 1,000 yards, receiving for the tight ends. So they'll definitely have their guys there.
Yeah, like I said, one last thing is that Henry is dealing with a shoulder injury. He's expected to miss a couple weeks, so he probably won't play at all in the preseason, but hopefully he'll be out there in week 1. And then Jonnu Smith suffered a left ankle sprain on Sunday, not considered serious, so once again, probably won't see him in the preseason.
Yeah, these guys are probably
should be
on the
ready
shelf
for week
for the rest
1.
of the preseason. Offensive line is actually really good. Third best offensive line according to Pro Football Focus.
Even though they lost Joe Thuney.
Shaq Mason, though, and Michael Onwenu, are two guys who are really good. David Andrews, of course, also on that line.
Yeah, like so they re-signed Ted Karras, so even with losing Joe Thuney, they're still projected to have one of the top offensive lines in the league, which helps when you have a kind of unproductive quarterback.
Yeah, give him as much time and, give these running backs protection, because I think it's just going to be a big running attack for them. Defense, definitely above average, and you get some guys back, which is awesome. Stephon Gilmore coming back.
One of the top corners in the league.
Yeah, still a top corner. Add Matthew Judon, Lawrence Guy, defensive end, quietly, becoming one of the better guys. Kyle Van Noy back from the Dolphins and the linebacking core, and J.C. Jackson along with Stephon Gilmore in the secondary to really round it out. So just looking great.
The Patriots have always had a great
still
defense.
Hightower's still out there, so and the McCourties the McCourties still there.
Yeah, so once again gonna have a great defense this upcoming season. Going into the fantasy outlook, so Newton and Jones both going undrafted. I think Mac Jones later on in the season could be a streamer when he becomes a starter. If he does well enough, maybe you add him to the back end of your bench for the last couple weeks of the season. Damian Harris, I think, is a nice bench running back. He's going around round 8 off draft boards right now. Kind of like the other running backs that we mentioned. If you're going 0 running back to start out, then he could be a nice piece. The biggest problem is in PPR, he just doesn't get receptions with James White. So you're really going to have to rely on the games where the Patriots get up and they're going to start feeding him 15, 20 touches.
Yeah, don't take any. I mean, Aguilar and Myers, Jacoby Myers, I'd stay away from New England receivers right now.
Yeah, they're both back-end bench options. You really don't know who's going to be the wide receiver 1 right now, but just in name alone, like having a wide receiver 1 from a team, like it deserves some sort of look in fantasy, so you could speculatively draft one of those guys in the back end. And then we mentioned Henry and Jonnu Smith. They're both kind of tight end 2s right now when they're both out there playing, and with Cam Newton starting. If one of them ends up going down for an extended period of time, then the other one will see a little bit more of an uptick in targets, so you could have them as a tight end 1, or even if Mac Jones is starting, see him maybe check down to some of those tight ends on some shorter routes. Yeah. So, but I think there's definitely better options out there than both of those guys.
And that defense definitely is something you should look for, especially with those guys returning. So definitely draft that defense.
For sure. And then this will be a pretty quick.
We'll make this one quick. It's the New York Jets, the team that has constantly been in their own way for the past 10 years almost.
Yeah, 2-14 last season. They haven't made the playoffs in 10 years, going on their 11th year right now. Adam Gase finally out of there. Just a huge train wreck of a tenure for him.
A dumpster fire, hot garbage, just smells like a New York City sewer. Just awful fit. There was guys who were trying to get traded by halftime. We saw that. Also losing Sam Darnold. The Sam Darnold experiment is over. We'll say that it's a D. I would give the grade to a failure.
Yeah, we've talked about Sam Darnold before, especially going into our draft show, since they did draft Zach Wilson and getting a quarterback.
I'm not saying him himself is a failure. I'm saying his time in New York.
Oh yeah, yes, definitely. So Adam Gase 9-23 in his 2 seasons as the Jets coach. Darnold was 13-25 in 3 seasons as a starter. Robert Saleh now takes over as the head coach of the 49ers.
A lot of people love Saleh. Saleh's, one of the first Muslim head, is the first Muslim head coach in the NFL. So really good story there. Really awesome guy, and we hope he succeeds on this team that's so snake bitten and so rotten.
Yeah, he's been leading some of those great 49er defenses over the past couple seasons. So we'll see how he does in his first head coaching duties in the NFL.
Yeah.
When you're looking at their offense, it's a sore sight to look at. So they lose a couple of minor names, Rashad Perriman, Frank Gore. We mentioned Darnold. Drafting Zach Wilson 2nd overall. There's going to be a lot of trial and error with him.
Yeah, we are. I think you and I are both in the same boat that we think Wilson's going to be a bust. You might be a little bit more high on him than I am.
Well, and the biggest thing for him is kind of like Sam Darnold too. As of right now, there's just not much around him
there really
to
isn't.
succeed.
No.
So it's hard to see him when you have a bottom tier offensive line, when you don't have much around him. They do draft Elijah Vera Tucker, they draft Elijah Moore, they draft Michael Carter, so all a couple of young players for this offense. So if they
signed Corey Davis too to help out 3 years at $37.5 million. Tevin Coleman also to help back, probably be the starting running back, just to help. But these are kind of like bandages on something that it's already broken. We've seen. I just don't think this offense is going to be anything to really be excited about at all.
Yeah, like I said, I think Wilson will make a lot of mistakes year one. I think there's going to be a lot of turnovers on the board. A few bright spots you could see, but like you said, I think this is going to be just a lot of trials, a lot of errors for this Jets offense to start out. Looking at the defensive side of the ball, not much better.
Average to below average. I mean, the Quinnen Williams, decent. They do add Sheldon Rankins, who everyone thought was going to break out for 10 years now from the Saints. Still hasn't done that, so we'll see. C.J. Mosley is coming back, though. Only played 2 games as a Jet, so hopefully they can have him, because when he was on the Ravens, he was a stud. And Marcus May, who's actually a kind of a underrated safety, really one of the better safeties, I would say, in the AFC.
Yeah, then they also signed Carl Lawson, who actually ruptured his Achilles.
I didn't want to say anything because he was literally just got the MRI yesterday, it seems.
Yeah, it was one of their big offseason additions, signed with a 3-year, $45 million deal, and now he's going to miss the whole first season of that deal, so definitely a big blow to this already kind of
depleted
Jets defense, to say the least. Quickly looking at the fantasy outlook, there's not a whole lot to look at from this Jets team. Like I said, with Zach Wilson, he's a streamer at best during some of those middle weeks of the season, just depending on what you get from him. Michael Carter's being drafted in the 7th round. I think Coleman will be the starter week 1.
Carter is a sexy pick. I'll say that. Like he could be something special. But
it's just tough because 1, he's a rookie. 2, he's on a team that's going to be trailing a lot, so they're not going to be running the football a lot. So he's really only going to be valuable maybe kind of towards the back half of the season in some of those rare wins or rare leads that the Jets have in ball games. Wide receivers, Corey Davis and Elijah Moore. I like both of them as bench options. Mentioned Corey Davis was a wide receiver 30 last season, so good for a wide receiver 3 flex option. Last year with the Titans, I think he's a good bench spot. And then same thing with Elijah Moore, the rookie. Don't really know what to expect from him, but I think he could be okay as a wide receiver, possibly wide receiver 1.
And defense, no, just there's better options. But I did want to say real quickly for the AFC North. You know what's funny with a lot of these guys that we just named, with what's his name? The receivers, Corey Davis and Elijah Moore.
What's up?
And Michael Carter. If these guys weren't wearing Jets green, wouldn't they seem so much better? Like such a better option.
It's like imagine these guys even on like the Patriots, like especially Michael Carter, like it would just be so much better. I would be much more excited about Corey Davis, Elijah Moore on the Patriots than the Nelson Aguilar, Jacoby
like Corey
Myers.
Davis on like the Chargers or something would be such a better fit, or like any of those guys on like even Denver, like some of these. It's just that's how bad like the Jets' taste is on our mouth.
I know you've always had like a draft conspiracy of never going after Jets guys.
There's 2 teams, and when we get to the NFC in a few weeks, I'll talk about another team. But there's 2 teams you never take offensive players from, and one of them is the Jets. All right, moving on to the AFC North. Probably one of the toughest divisions right now.
Yeah, definitely 2, if not 3, very competitive teams for the division. One team is a little bit regressing, which we'll talk about, but definitely have 2 big dogs when you talk about the Ravens.
Yeah, two dogs who are going to be Ben's big dogs in there with the Ravens and Browns, and even the Bengals, who we'll talk about, are not going to be as bad as they were. Granted, they still have a lot of holes to fill, but they're not going to be as bad.
The arrow is pointing upward for them, but still a couple years away. But let's start out with the Baltimore Ravens, who were 11-5 last season, lost 17-3 to Buffalo in the divisional round, ended up winning in the wild card round. They were one of the most exciting offenses in the league, Stein.
Number 1 in running the ball.
I was going to say, in running the football, because you have a guy in Lamar Jackson who's basically a running back at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I was going to say number 1 in running the ball, number 32 in passing the ball, Andrew.
Yeah, exactly. They were the best team in running the football by a wide margin. The next team was the Titans. They were almost 25 yards per game behind them in second place, and you figure with Derrick Henry in there, that's a big reason why. They were also 7th in points per game last season, so it showed even though their offense was one-dimensional, they could still put points on the scoreboard and still were very successful offensively. And like I mentioned, leading the way is Lamar Jackson, who, like Josh Allen, is one of those 2018 quarterbacks that he'll be in the last year of his deal next season, so he's going to be looking for a big contract extension. 26 touchdowns last season, just 9 interceptions, had 1,100 rushing yards.
I mean, good ratio of touchdowns to picks. For a guy who's always been criticized that he's not that great of a passer.
Yeah, just only 2,800 yards passing, which is really the big thing. You see these other top quarterbacks with the 4,000, and now we're talking about 5,000 yard seasons.
Yeah.
For some of these guys, they don't seem too worried about not getting an extension done. Jackson and even Harbaugh both mentioned that they're in no rush to get a deal done.
Which is good. Focus on the football. Let the play do the talking.
Yeah. Lamar has had COVID now twice. He had it once. Remember, missed a game during the regular season in 2020, and then got it late July, early August this past year. He's finally been cleared and is able to play once again. But just another guy when we're looking at COVID that.
Did say that he's gotten it twice and he still doesn't have the vaccine. So I think the quote was like something, I don't want to misquote him, but it was like, I'm waiting for more research. It's like, you had COVID twice. Like, what more research do you need?
Yeah, you would think from a guy like Beasley, who I don't think he's gotten COVID yet, or at least hasn't been publicized in the media. So you would think a guy that's gotten it not once but twice would maybe kind of reconsider, but it seems like he's still kind of pumping the brakes on it. But like I said, he'll be a number one option running the football. J.K. Dobbins will be their RB1. In his rookie season last year, he had a little over 800 yards rushing, 9 rushing touchdowns in just 134 carries. So that's some pretty good numbers. They also have Gus Edwards, who had 700 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns. So we mentioned, of course, with those numbers from those 3 guys, you can understand why they were a top rushing attack last season and will be again this season.
Yeah, just great touchdown numbers all around.
The only guy missing from last season is Mark Ingram, and he was a healthy scratch towards the back end of the season.
Yeah, he was on the downslope. Receiving core is their biggest weakness,
and it has been now
for the past 3 years.
I would say you've been talking about getting Lamar a number one receiving option. It kind of got the Goodwill version of a wide receiver one.
Yeah.
You add Sammy Watkins, you add Rashad Bateman and Tylan Wallace through the draft, so kind of putting Band-Aids over that wide receiver one label. Watkins only 400 yards receiving last year for the Chiefs. And another guy with some injury concerns. The only time he's played in all 16 games in a season was his rookie year back in 2014, which I couldn't believe Sammy Watkins is still only 28 years old.
I feel like that name, just Sammy Watkins, makes me think of 30 automatically, 30 plus.
I could have sworn that he was probably 31, 32 years old.
Seems like he's been in the league forever. They do add Rashad Bateman in the draft. So far, he did get injured, though.
Yeah, he had core muscle surgery, so he had injury in the core groin area. From what I'm hearing, a guy from The Athletic said that it's more realistic that he begins on the IR, so missing a minimum of the first 3 games of the season, then starts week 1. They're expecting 6 to 8 week recovery, which it would be 7 weeks at the end of that 3rd week of the IR stint.
Yeah,
so he's probably going to miss
start off.
Yeah, I was going to say they really liked what he had been doing in camp. So that's a big loss for them on the receiving end of things. They do have Marquise Brown, who was also kind of banged up, had a hamstring injury early on in camp. He had 8 touchdowns last season, almost 800 yards receiving.
That's a good year for a team that's so low in passing.
He's just not a big possession receiver, more of a downfield threat, which really doesn't play to Lamar's strength.
No. And then Mark Andrews at tight end, who's kind of been a consistency for them, which has been nice. Over 700 yards and 7 touchdowns last year. Yeah,
once again, will be one of the top tight ends in the league going into this season.
Offensive line upgrade, I would say. They get Ronnie Staley back after season-ending ankle surgery last year. Also have do lose Orlando Brown.
Traded him to the Chiefs right before the draft. Got that back-end first-round pick that they used to pick Rashad Bateman, I believe. I don't remember if it was their pick or the Chiefs pick that they did.
Yeah, but did sign Alejandro Villanueva away from the rival Steelers.
Yeah, he is moving from left tackle to right tackle. Will be playing on the other side of the line for the first time in his career. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly he picks up on that other side. And then they also add Kevin, I think Zeitler.
Yeah.
He was playing for the Giants the past couple seasons. He'll be the starting right guard for them. Left guard is really their big question mark, but overall one of the better offensive lines with the ranked number 12.
Still a great offensive line. Defensive, Ravens have always been about defense, and it's pretty much the same story with them. Derek Wolfe on the defensive line, Calais Campbell, do lose Judon, but they do have Patrick Queen linebacking, Marcus Peters, and Marlon Humphrey as
just big
corners.
Big name after big name.
Yeah, Justin Houston they do add too, which is funny.
A nice little veteran pickup. Second fewest points allowed last season, so once again, expect them to be near the top of the league.
Yeah, and they just always seem to add. I mean, Tyus Bowser is one of my favorite players on that defense too.
Why, just because of his name or because of how he plays?
Just because of both. I really like that defense. Let's talk about fantasy. Lamar is definitely a guy you want to take.
Being drafted as the overall QB4, we mentioned with Josh Allen earlier, he's going to be in that conversation. Kyler Murray, Pat Mahomes, just one of the top quarterbacks off the board.
Yeah.
He was the overall QB number 1 in 2019 when he was the MVP. Dropped all the way to QB 10 last season. We mentioned he did miss a couple games with COVID. Did kind of start out not as good as you would have hoped. So look for somewhere in the middle going into this
Can
upcoming
I get COVID's
season.
third time?
I don't know if anyone's had it for the third time yet. I mean, the longer that we get away from it, you might
we'll
start
see.
seeing.
There's a new variant every day. J.K. Dobbins ranked at 14th. Probably a guy that would be good as a running back too, I would say.
Yeah, he's getting drafted in the late second, early third round, so definitely going to be a running back 2 for your team. Was the running back 24 last season, but now from the start of the season, he's going to be the running back 1, so expect a little uptick from that number last season.
Yeah.
When you're looking at their wide receivers, all great bench options between Hollywood Brown, Bateman when he's healthy, and then Sammy Watkins. Yeah. Kind of like some of these other teams we talked about. Hopefully one of them will emerge as kind of the wide receiver 1, the top target. Where
I put my money on Marquise Brown because Bateman, it's going to take a while for him to get out there. Watkins, I just feel like Watkins is eternally a bench guy.
Yeah, so we'll see if one of them ends up emerging and can be a viable fantasy option as we go along into the season. And then, of course, you're going to be drafting Mark Andrews. He's one of those top 5 or 6 tight ends that you're going to be targeting in the middle rounds. Yeah. He was a tight end 6 last season, being drafted as a 5th overall tight end. So.
And that defense, take it. Definitely take it.
Yep, 4th best defense last season. So, once again, like some of these other teams, going to be another top option.
Yeah. Let's talk about another AFC big dog is the Browns. It's so crazy. It's so weird to say that. Just the Browns are being a contender and a big dog.
Yeah, they were 11-5 last season. Won a playoff game against their rival, the Steelers. Ended up losing to Kansas City in the divisional round, but got their first playoff win since 1995.
Everything is trending up for this team. They just seem to get improved in every single weakness every year. Remember last year we said it was their offensive line, and their offensive line definitely improved this year. Well, even the year before that was quarterback, obviously, and we saw Baker. Let's talk about Baker. 2019, bad year.
Yeah, 21 interceptions, 54.4 QBR. Last season, just 8 interceptions, 72.2 QBR. So you really saw that positive
improvement for Baker. Really, kind of the just doesn't talk a lot.
It was the last piece that needed to fall into place for this Browns team to be successful, and he really showed it last season. Like Lamar, he's one of those 2018 quarterbacks going to be looking for a contract extension, signed through next season. They accepted his 5th year option, so it'll be interesting to see with how he does this year if the Browns end up going all in on him, signing him to that big extension, or they let him test the waters in free agency.
Yeah, I mean, but it's nice for him because he doesn't have to pass as much when he's got Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt in the backfield.
Which, speaking of deals, Nick Chubb just got a brand new 3-year, $36 million deal.
Nice. That's a great running back deal. Like a 3-year, only getting 12 a year, but still.
Compared to a guy like Jamal Adams just signed like a 5-year, $70 million deal.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, running backs, they have a shelf life of so little. But Nick Chubb really kind of emerged as one of the top rushers in the league.
He was a 1,000-yard rusher with only playing in 12 games last season, had 12 touchdowns and just 190 carries, so absolutely fantastic production from him. Kareem Hunt has been just a great running back, too, for them. He had 800 yards on the ground, 6 touchdowns, added another 305 touchdowns to the air. So you combine those numbers, that's 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns from your running back too. So just some amazing production.
Chubb's like your ground attack guy, whereas Hunt's your change of pace and your pass catching guy. It's a really good way that they have it, their running backs.
Well, once again, it was so nice because when Chubb got injured last season, you had Kareem Hunt, a guy that's had starting experience in the past with a successable team like the Chiefs, and he was able to step in there and go right back into that
Kareem
starting role.
He could easily be a starting on some of these teams that we've talked about and we'll talk about. Receiving core, you have the return of Odell. Only played in 7 games last year because of a torn ACL. Very unproductive last year.
Was a 1,000-yard receiver in 2019 with the Browns. He avoided the PUP list to start out training camp, so he is healthy, looking to be out there week 1, but I still don't know what to really expect from him. You saw once he went down last year, the offense really started to pick up and kind of click. Mm-hmm. People saying that Baker was force-feeding OBJ when he was out there. So some question marks for him going into this season to see what kind of production he's going to have.
He's definitely faced some adversity. He's not the guy that he once was, the star that he once was. especially being in Cleveland. He's not in the big market that New York was. He's got to take a little bit of humble pie and really realize that he's got to do his best to help his team, and maybe his best could be 3 or 4 catches a game, not 10 catches a game.
Yeah,
so,
and once again, we talked about with the 2 great running backs, with this being a great team, they're really going to rely on that run game, and once they get up, they're going to ground and pound and just use that clock for the rest of the ball game. So there could be some games where even though they win on the scoreboard, he could have a quiet stat line.
Yeah, looking good in training camp has been Donovan Peoples-Jones, the kid out of Michigan. Has looked good, but we'll see him in the regular season.
Yeah, they've liked him so far. He's competing for that wide receiver 3, maybe wide receiver 4 position.
Juice at the number 2.
And just another high volume season for him. 72 catches, 840 yards. He was a 1,200-yard guy.
Only 3 TDs, though, which is a little bit concerning. But when you have a guy like Hooper and the running backs that they had...
Well, and it's also concerning since OBJ missed half the season.
Yeah, that's true.
He was a 1,200-yard guy in 2019, so expect to see anywhere from like 800 to 1,000 yards again from him this upcoming season.
Hopefully touchdowns can be maybe 4 or 5 or 6, more than...
Yeah, speaking of a guy that they're looking for more production from this season, Austin Hooper, a guy that we know from his Atlanta Falcons days, only had 400 yards receiving and 4 touchdowns last season for the Browns. Kevin Stefanski said recently that he expects a larger role in the passing game for Hooper, just to have a year with the team under his belt, just gets to know the playbook and has some more familiarity with it. They're expecting more from him. And then Rashard Higgins in 13 games last year had 600 yards receiving, so... we talked about the great running backs. They do have a decent group of pass catchers as well, just to keep them with a balanced attack. And then mentioning the offensive line, Pro Football Focus ranks them as the best offensive line of 2020, and then the best one going into this season.
Yeah.
Because they were first in pass blocking, second in run blocking, graded out last season. J.C. Treader and Wyatt Teller were the second best center, top guards, respectively.
And you got Jedrick Wills also on that line. So just a great offensive line that, like we said, remember last year or 2 years ago, they're like, they don't have any help for Baker, and now they have one of the best offensive lines.
Now it makes sense why they had the 11-5 and such a successful season that they did last year.
And the running backs have been so successful. Defense was kind of this year's problem for a lot of them. They do add John Johnson, Troy Hill, Anthony Walker, Malik Jackson, Greg Newsome, who's I think is going to be a star at safety, out of Northwestern, Richard LeCount, a Georgia guy, Marvin Wilson, the guy who threw the shoe, as everyone knows. So defense will look to be improved. I kind of hope what they've done with the offensive line they can do with their defense.
Yeah, I mean, they made a lot of additions to the defense. That was a big need for them going into this offseason. And, I mean, they were an average defense last year. I think people were expecting maybe a little bit more from them. I think they'll hop into a top 10 defense going into this season. Yeah. As we look into the fantasy outlook, Baker Mayfield is being drafted as the quarterback 15 right now. He was QB 18 last season, so it kind of falls into that category of a super flex option, a streamer option.
Yeah, and if you really like him, maybe he's the 12th guy off the board.
Mm-hmm.
If you really like him.
Nick Chubb is going off the board as the running back 7. He was number 11, even with missing 4 games last year. Back end first round, early second round guy. He's going to be either your running back 1 or you pair him at the back end of the first, start of the second, getting 2 great running backs for your team. Kareem Hunt's got standalone value, even though he is the running back 2 on the team. He's going in the 4th round, so the same round as Myles Gaskin for the Dolphins.
Great flex pickup if you can get him.
Yeah, and a top handcuff option if Nick Chubb does go down once again this season, that you'll be able to have him and be able to start him as a running back 2 or running back 1.
Yeah. OBJ still has some value. Is not the guy that he once was, especially coming off an injury, so be wary of that. Drafting around, usually picked around 5s. The 5th round could be a good flex, maybe your first guy off the bench, but he's not a guy, wide receiver 1 or 2 like he once was.
Yeah, definitely see some regression from him, but like I said, I think he's fine if he's your flex position or your first guy off the bench. Landry, just another good bench guy. Austin Hooper, tight end 2. I'd consider picking him up just as like the last bench spot in your league, and definitely a streamer once you get into those tight end bye weeks. And then we mentioned with the defense, yes, they were.
Yeah, I would say definitely not one of the top targets, but definitely a team that's going to be improved.
Yeah, not a top target, but in these 10, 12-man leagues, if you got a defense, I think they're still going to be
great streaming option when your defense is on bye.
If they're playing a weak team going into.
Yeah. All right, so 2 big dogs and a team that last year surprised many, going 12-4, is the Pittsburgh Steelers, losing that thrilling wild card game to their rival Cleveland, and a team by all accounts many people think is regressing.
Yeah, we talked about going into this division, the Bengals with the arrow going up. The Steelers definitely have that arrow going down. We mentioned
they got the little gray line or the red arrow going down. They're kind of like stagnant to going down.
Yeah, we mentioned the 11-0 start before, how bad they were to end the season. Just the terrible rushing attack that they had last year. Going into this season, you got a 39-year-old Big Ben entering his 18th season. Was still productive last season. He was almost a 4,000-yard passer, 33 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. So still putting up great numbers even though he's almost 40 years old.
His biggest problem, and we'll get to it, is going to be the offensive line. But, I mean, reports have saying that he is looking good.
Apparently
lost
he slimmed
some weight.
down some.
But I don't really know how much Big Ben, what weight loss for Big Ben is like compared to what weight loss for.
Is he gonna be a Lamar Jackson type runner now?
No, probably not. He's gonna look like he's like Gronkowski, covering that crazy play in Miami a few years ago when he runs. Their running game, which had been a calling card for the previous few years, last year was god awful.
Yeah, James Conner's gone. He's with the Cardinals now. So they draft Najee Harris in the first round. He's going to be their bell cow back now, which a lot of people are excited for what he's going to do this upcoming season. I'm not as high on him as I think other people are, at least from what I've been hearing. I think he'll be great just because he's going to be out there for all 3 downs probably, but once again, when we talk about the offensive line, you're going to see some of the struggles that this offense could have throughout the season.
Yeah, you got Benny Snell.
I would say they still got the same backups.
Andy McFarlane and Curtis Jalen Samuels. I was thinking Curtis Samuel as backups. So it will kind of be, I would say, a parade of running backs. I mean, with Harris being the leading guy, so.
Yeah, and then you got the nice trio of wide receivers, Deontay Johnson, Juju, and Chase Claypool, all had anywhere from 800 to 900 yards receiving last season, all had at least 7 touchdowns, all had at least 60 receptions, so that's going to be the big part of their game, and they had such inflated numbers because their run game at one point during the season was just short passes to these guys. From Big Ben, so hopefully going to have a little bit more of a balance now with Najee, but still expect great seasons really from all 3 of these guys. Yeah,
we were really surprised to see Juju back, especially with the kind of the poo-poo that's been put on him by the team.
Yeah, by the team, the fan base really didn't kind of turned on him towards the back half of the season, but
they ended up saying a lot of things too.
Yeah, they ended up re-signing him, like I said, 831 yards, 9 touchdowns. So I don't think
can't argue with that production. But
I would say I don't think we'll have that big a production, but still expect a decent season from Juju. Claypool did avoid a major injury in practice this past week.
Yeah.
It came down awkwardly. It's only a minor ankle sprain, so anyone fantasy-wise that owns Chase Claypool, that's a big escape for them in terms of major injury.
Yeah. And then they also have James Washington, wide receiver 4 for them, who also has rumors of wanting to leave. I would understand when there's such busy receiving core.
Yeah, they're trying to get traded and be a wide receiver 2 somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly, or
team.
even a 3. Tight end do have decent Eric Ebron. Over 500 yards last year, 5 TDs in his first season.
They drafted Freiermuth out of
Pat Freiermuth, who's going to be a great tight end too for them. So I'd say average tight ends.
Yeah, and then looking at their offensive line, that's going to be the big concern. Lose 4 guys from their offensive line between Filer, Villanueva, Pouncey, and DeCastro. Both of those last 2 guys retiring. Pro Football Focus has them as the second worst ranked offensive line.
I mean, Filer isn't that big of a loss, but Villanueva pretty good. Pouncey and DeCastro really good. Mm-hmm. So those are 2 guys that Big Ben has had for a while and really trust. the trust with Big Ben was there.
That's what, when you have a shaky run game and you have a 39-year-old quarterback that's not very mobile, that's you really need to rely on your offensive line to be able to protect those guys. And I think that's why you may see some problems with them, especially early on in the season, of them trying to patchwork an offensive line together for this team.
Yeah. Defense, though, is still pretty good. Seems like the Steelers always have a pretty good defense. They do lose Bud Dupree and Mike Hilton, but they still have T.J. Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick, Joe Hayden, and Cam Hayward. So
T.J. and Minka both won some contract extensions. T.J.'s actually been holding out a training camp, and there are apparently reports out saying Minka won't be extended because they can't afford to give them both contract extensions. I think T.J. Watt is their number one priority, getting him signed down after this season. But yeah, they're going to have another great defense, even with losing a couple of big names. They were the third fewest in yards per game and points per game allowed last season. Yeah. So once again, they're especially now more than ever going to need to rely on their defense to be successful.
Yeah, definitely not going to be as successful overall, the team next year, this coming season compared to last season. I mean, that's mainly because of everything they've lost.
That's what they've lost, and then between the Browns getting better and then the Ravens staying hold as a top team in the division.
Yeah, fantasy wise, Big Ben is pretty much still viable as a quarterback two or a streamer.
I was say he's a back end QB1 in those 12-team leagues. You talked about Baker being like the QB12 off the board.
Yeah, you have him as literally the QB13 last season. So it's like,
so he's right on that back end fringe QB1 numbers. Najee's getting drafted in the mid to late second round this year, coming off as the running back 12.
Do you think that might be a little hot?
High? See, I had a problem. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a first-round draft pick last year, and you saw the disappointing numbers that he put up, including me, who drafted him in one of my leagues, and I ended up finishing second to last in that league. So, the biggest thing that people like about him is, once again, he's going to be the 3-down back. So in terms of fantasy, you're looking at him getting all the receiving work out of the backfield. We saw that Big Ben was throwing the ball short a lot last season. So people like him as that bell cow back, especially in the PPR league. So I think that's a little early for him, but he definitely deserves to go in like that late second, early third round.
Yeah. Wide receiver, it's your pick your poison there, and I mean that in a good way. You can pick one of these, any three of these guys.
Their ADP between the three guys are separated from 63 to 74 between them, so literally 11 spots.
Yeah, you could pick and choose any of these guys to work.
That's what Deontay Johnson is the safest, the best for PPR. I think he's going to get a lot of those receptions. And then Claypool's got the most upside. I think Juju is the most boomer bust, most volatile of the three. So, like I said, it really depends on the wide receivers that you pick before. If you get a guy like Tyler Lockett early, probably go with Deontay Johnson for those guaranteed receptions.
Yeah. It's just going to be, like I said, you pick any of the three guys. And then in terms of the tight end, Ebron and Freiermuth, both kind of undrafted.
Yeah, possible streaming options when you get to the bye weeks.
And Freiermuth could be a guy that we kind of tab for coming years, because I don't think, there's going to be a lot of turnover in the Steelers team.
Definitely.
Between Big Ben and Ebron, and these guys will be gone.
Yeah, definitely a guy that needed to be picked up in dynasty leags going down the road.
Yeah, the only reason I say that is because I picked him up.
Yeah, but for redraft for this upcoming season, you're probably not going to see much from Freiermuth.
No,
and then we mentioned Steelers defense. Yes, they were the second best last season. Probably won't be that good, but still a top 10 option.
Minka will get you picks, and that secondary will get you picks. And Watt, if they figure it out, will get you some sacks. Now a team that the Bengals are trending in the right direction, but this team is just not going to be good.
Yeah, and half of it goes to just the tough division that they're in. I mean, all three of those teams last year had 11-plus wins. Yeah. Expect them all to be 500 or better this upcoming season. The Bengals are going to be the bottom dweller once again in the division. They were 4-11-1 last season. Joe Burrow, of course, had that horrific season-ending knee injury. Just played in the 10 games last season. Was decent in those 10 games, 2,700 yards, 13 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 3 rushing touchdowns as well. Just the biggest thing is his health. Is he going to be the same? With that knee injury, they're not going to play him at all in the preseason, so he's going to go out there cold turkey week 1. I think he'll be a little rusty to start out the season. Maybe don't expect him to get back to his normal self until closer to the midway point in the season.
Yeah, what Herbert has done in LA is what people want Joe Burrow to really do, to emerge as. So we both love Joe Burrow. We think he's going to be good. It's just going to be his injury. That's his biggest thing. I mean, this injury is probably one of the most prolific quarterback injuries we've seen, up there with maybe like Dak in the past.
Alex Smith.
Oh God, I didn't even want to think about that one. In the past 3 or 4 years. Well, I'm talking about guys that actually have futures, you know.
Yeah.
In the past 3 or 4 years. So we'll see what he does. We hope for the best for him, but it's really going to be a upward battle for him. As someone who has had a knee injury similar to him, it's not super physical. It's all mental. It's going to be all mental with him.
And that's been the reports from training camp, is just like mentally getting over that, just with some shaky training camp work. You
think your body, you think you can't do this, but you physically can. You just don't want to because you're worried something's going to happen. And what really a lot of people and a lot of experts are saying is they really didn't get him a lot of help for that offensive line. You had the chance to draft Sewell. You don't.
Yeah.
You do draft a guy, though, that we will talk about in his receiving core who just like will be – it's a sexy receiving core for them.
Yeah, exactly. We'll go back to the running backs after talk about the receiving core, but I really like what they've got in their top 3 between Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, T. Higgins guy came last year. Neither of us really like Clemson receivers. I mean, besides Nuke Hopkins – Clemson receivers haven't really Sammy Watkins, just guys who haven't really emerged. But
he had
T.
a
Higgins,
great rookie season, almost 1,000 yards. He had 6 touchdowns.
I'll say add Mike Williams to that Clemson receiver conversation.
Yeah, Jamar Chase, apparently he hasn't shown as much separation as you'd hope in training camp, but once again, I think that might be a little more just like chasing headlines than anything else.
Yeah.
It's a rookie receiver coming back with a quarterback that's coming back from an injury.
And Jamar Chase didn't even play didn't get to play that much last year, if any, on a LSU team that was not as good. And then Tyler Boyd just kind of just your go-to guy, reliable.
Yeah, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons in 2018 and 2019. Had 850 yards last season, so he'll once again be in the mix. And this is a team that's going to be trailing a lot, so they're going to be passing the ball quite a bit. So all 3 wide receivers are going to be good this upcoming season.
Yeah.
Circling back to the running back, Joe Mixon, speaking of injuries, only played in 6 games last year because of a foot injury that just kind of kept lingering on throughout the season.
A lot of people, including myself, did get rid of Joe Mixon.
Yeah, you passed him on to me in our Dynasty League. Thank you very much. But
have fun with those injuries.
He did have back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons in 2018 and 2019. Giovanni Bernard is now gone from this team, so expect him to have
end of an era.
Workhorse 3-down back role. He's trying to get himself a ring with Tom and the Bucks.
Yeah, end of an era there. It seems,
Giovanni Bernard has been on that team for 10 seasons, it feels like.
Oh, I know, exactly. But Joe Mixon going to be taking that, that workhorse, that bell cow role with Bernard gone, and just really looking forward to returning from his injury.
And then
similar to Joe.
Another guy returning from injury, CJ Uzama, 100% after a torn Achilles week 2 last season. He's going to be their starting tight end. Not much tight end appeal from him fantasy wise.
No, not at all. I didn't. You don't even think of him in the conversation.
And then, like you mentioned, just trying to improve on that offensive line that they've got. They're 25th ranked going into this season. Jonah Williams is the best guy that they've got over at left tackle.
Add Riley Reith, do draft Jackson Carman, but like I said, Sewell's available. This is going to come back to bite him in the ass. If something happens to Joe, like it's just going to be like all hell's going to break loose.
Yeah, we mentioned it during our draft coverage that it made so much sense for Sewell. Like a team with a franchise quarterback coming off of a season-ending injury, just to get the clear-cut best offensive lineman in the
guy
draft.
who was getting comparisons to freaking Anthony Munoz, the Hall of Famer Bengal player, and then he's it's just, I mean, I do like the Joe to Chase connection.
Yeah,
that could be
LSU
something
to
that's
LSU.
I mean that, and they obviously took the world by storm in 2019, but I mean it just. Joe's going to have to stay healthy, and Jamar's going to have to play like he did in college.
Exactly. Looking at their defense, it's a below-average defense.
It's going to be 28th, 29th defense.
Yeah,
let's be honest.
They add Trey Hendrickson. We mentioned Mike Hilton leaving Pittsburgh. He's in Cincinnati. And just overall as a team, they're definitely not going to compete this upcoming season, but they've got an exciting future up ahead.
Honestly, they really do. It's not a team that I feel as bad for as a team that we'll get to next week when we talk about a certain AFC South team, but they're definitely bottom half of the AFC.
Yeah, then just to round out the fantasy outlook for this team, Burrow's getting drafted as a QB1, the quarterback 11 right now. I think to start out the season, he's closer to a QB2.
I would say I'm not a fan of that QB1.
I think I'd rather have Baker or
easy.
Big Ben to start out the season at least.
Yeah, I'm just weary with him. And then
he could be a guy that if you draft him as the second quarterback on your team, maybe as a guy that you can trade later on this season when you start to see him just getting more reps under his belt.
Yeah.
But Joe Mixon is getting drafted as the running back 11, mid to late second round, right around Najee territory. He was the running back 13 in 2019, running back 10 in 2018, so he's been up around those numbers before. If he can stay healthy, then expect for similar numbers once again from him. And then kind of like the Pittsburgh wide receivers, between Chase, Higgins, and Boyd, they all have, especially Chase and Higgins, have similar ADPs going around a flex position in rounds 5 and 6. Tyler Boyd getting drafted as a bench option, but he's definitely good for PPR. He was the wide receiver 29, 18, and 17 over the last 3 seasons in PPR formats.
These guys are like the Diet Coke version of the Pittsburgh receivers.
Yeah, just the cheaper version of those 3. Yeah. And then stay away from their starting tight end Uzama and the Bengals defense as well.
Yeah, stay away from that right now. But just look for this team to just be overall easier to watch, I would say.
Better on the eyes, as you could say. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for our first divisional preview show covering the AFC East and the AFC North. Thank you guys once again for tuning in. We are so happy to be back and covering football once again. And next week's show, we'll be talking about the other 2 divisions in the AFC West and the AFC South, so be sure to tune into that next week.
AFC South, that's going to be a fun division to talk about.
Oh, it always is a fun division, Stein, but like I said, that's going to do it for...
Remember a few years ago, I said that they were one of the best divisions. The mighty have fallen.
On that Freezing Cold Takes Twitter account. But once again, guys, thank you guys for tuning into the Couch Quarterbacks podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, and thank you for tuning in. Once again, have a great day.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you next week for the rest of the preview, guys.
Yep, see you on the flip side.
See ya.